Hello everybody and welcome to this video looking at economic developments in Tsarist Russia between 1855 and 1894. We're looking at industrial developments and the land issue, which is a really big issue following emancipation. So this is a video which is part of my series looking at Tsarist and Communist Russia 1855 through to 1964. I'm getting there slowly. I've got most of the way up to the whole series of videos I'm going to do up to 1894, and then I'll start on the next stage and we'll get the joys of Nicholas II. And then my aim is ultimately to have covered the entire A-level spec on Tsarist and Communist Russia. So I hope this is useful for you. We're looking at economics, and really we have to start with emancipation. Now this was supposed to be the spark that would bring about economic change in Russia, that would allow a transformation of the Russian economy. In theory, it would give the former serfs the ability to leave the village and to work in industry. It would start a stimulation of domestic markets, as former serfs could sell some crops and have some money to spend and buy some land and then get and build wealth, and then hopefully this would lead to an emergence of a middle class. However, redemption payments, grain requisitions, high taxes, but in particular indirect taxes, kept the former serfs poor, and this really damaged the chances of economic growth. And also the mir, which tended to be quite restrictive, not only in terms of people's movements but also in terms of bringing in new practices, also really damaged the potential impact of emancipation. So it looked like it should have been the spark that should have brought about a real kind of economic transformation in Russia. But there were too many problems with it. It could be argued that it didn't quite do what it should have done if there hadn't been the restrictions that were placed on the former serfs. Agriculture and land is where I think we need to start in terms of looking at the economy, because Russia is almost completely an agricultural economy. Now, one of the problems, as I said, that came out of emancipation was the level of land that was given to the peasantry. So your average peasant got about 4 hectares of land, which is barely enough to survive on, to be a subsistence farmer on. So that's not going to transform the economy, because the peasants are going to work the land and they're barely going to have enough to survive. They aren't going to stimulate markets, they aren't going to buy things, they aren't going to produce large surpluses and lead to economic growth that way. And also added to this, the nobility kept the best land for themselves. So where the land was particularly fertile, then the nobility would give away less of it. And one of the notable regions for that was the Ukraine. The fact that every male child had the right to land when they were born into a mir really also kind of made this problem even worse, because ultimately, if you had population growth in a village, then the land is going to be divided into smaller and smaller allocations, making the chances of that economic development, that economic next step, even less likely, because people are going to be at a subsistence level. Farming methods remained rather backwards. The mir elders resisted change. They liked tradition, they liked the way things had always been done, and it was difficult because people didn't have control of their individual farms for them to do anything particularly different. And they also lacked the money to invest in equipment, and education was also lacking in a lot of these areas as well. In 1878, only 50% of peasants could produce a surplus, and there were some, however, that were successful, and these became known as the kulaks. And these were successful peasants who grew the lot of land that they had and started to expand. And one of the reasons why they could expand was the emergence of the land banks, and these lent money, first of all in 1883 to peasants, but also from 1885 to nobility, and it lent the money and organised for them to be able to buy surplus land or to buy land off nobles, and it helped with the contracts and things like that. It had very low interest rates to try and encourage this kind of activity, and 26 million hectares of land was bought by peasants between 1877 and 1905. So not everything was bleak, and this kulak class are quite important in terms of transforming the economy to an extent. The yields, which is the amount of food grown in a given area of land, so how productive a crop is, remain very low compared to Western Europe. In fact, the grain yields were 3 times lower than those in the UK and Germany. So you had a comparable bit of land in Russia as you had in the UK. The UK bit of land would grow 3 times as much grain. So we can see here that agriculture remained rather ineffective. Now, the most horrendous event in terms of agriculture in this period was the Great Famine of 1891 to 92. One of the things that is particularly bad about this is it is to an extent man-made. And it's man-made by the finance minister Vasily Gratskaya. And now he infamously said, "We shall ourselves not eat, but we shall export." And he really concentrated on grain exports as the driving force for him to balance the books in Russia and to get the capital in that was needed for industrial investment. So this policy of grain requisition to export it was coupled with an early winter, a long hot summer, and this ruined crops and on poor diets, disease then spread amongst the Russian people, diseases like cholera and typhoid, and in total 350,000 people died in Russia of starvation and disease. So this was a horrendous event for the Russian economy, but more importantly, it was a horrendous event for the Russian people, and is one that reflected really badly on the on the Tsarist regime, because they did very little to help the peasants. Vasily Gratskaya is removed and he's replaced by Vit, who we're going to look at in a minute. Now we're going to go back in time a bit and we're going to concentrate on the industrial side of it. So you've got the kind of agricultural background of what's going on with emancipation and an attempt to stimulate the agricultural economy with the land banks and things like that. Now with industry, the first kind of key finance minister on this is von Reuten. And he felt that the state needed to control economic growth and economic investment. He was finance minister from 1862 to 1878. And there was a need for this kind of state level control because there wasn't really a middle class in Russia that could drive industrialization. So the kind of reality and the ideology fitted. He transformed a lot of key elements in the running of the economy. He transformed the treasury, making it more efficient, and it got to the point it was actually publishing budgets and had accounts. He stopped the process of tax farming. Now, tax farming was when the government used to sell the right to collect taxes to individuals for a certain area, and they would go around and collect the taxes, obviously skim some off for themselves. Now, this was abolished and the tax system was reformed. Tariffs had been a kind of a mainstay of Russian economic policy, and they were reduced to try and encourage foreign trade and foreign investment. And the government gave guarantees on the returns on dividends to try and encourage people to invest their money and to encourage industrialization and trying to encourage foreign investors as well. And the government subsidized the development of key areas, in particular the railways, and von Reuter's friends benefited from this greatly. He had a tendency to give them contracts. The government also supported the growth of the cotton industry, which was at a particularly key moment in time here with the Civil War in America, which meant that the American cotton industry was compromised temporarily. And they also supported growth of the coal mining, notably in Donetsk. Banking was also improved to make more credit available, the setting up of a state bank in 1870, municipal banks in 1862, and saving banks in 1869. And this all contributed to an improvement in the economy and levels of investment. So we can see a degree of success here, but nothing hugely revolutionary. And this is merely a case of Russia starting to get itself more in line with the Western countries that are further ahead of it. Was von Reuten successful? Well, to an extent he was. Annual growth rate was about 6%, which is not bad at all. It's actually pretty good. The railway industry expanded. Other industries expanded, particularly with the help of foreign experts and money. A new industry emerged: oil in Baku, ironworks in Donetsk, iron mining in Krivoy. And the Russian government was not in the best position, but it was at least doing something in terms of industrialization. There is several rather big buts on all of this. the Russian government was still spending about a third of its income paying off debt. The domestic market, as we've seen with the problems in agriculture, still remained really, really small. So because most Russians remained incredibly poor, there wasn't really a domestic market for buying goods. And so the government raised tariffs in 1878 to try and make up for the problems with debt and to increase its revenue. It was very reliant on indirect taxes, which were paid by the peasants, which was making the problems of the domestic market even worse, because the peasants didn't have any money, and if they bought anything, there was high taxes on it. And underlying all of this is the ruble, which is the Russian currency, and that varied enormously in terms of value, and this created instability in terms of trade. The next finance minister of real note is Vasily Gratskaya, and he was finance minister from 1887 to 1892. His key aim was to balance the budget, and his methods were crude, to say the least, but they were effective. They did have this terrible price that we've already seen. So he introduced a 30% tariff on imported raw materials, aiming to boost Russia's iron, coal and oil industries, kind of protecting them from foreign competition. And he also wanted Russia to be able to build its own industrial machinery, because this was another area where it was falling behind. He focused on doing this by driving up grain exports, and he did increase 18% more as a percentage of Russian exports in the years 1881 to 1891. So he is gaining some success here, and he does manage to balance the budget whilst encouraging economic growth. And in 1892, the budget was in surplus. However, the cost to the Russian people of this policy was absolutely catastrophic, as we saw in the details we looked at earlier with the Great Famine. So Vasily Gratskaya achieved what he wanted to, but 350,000 Russians died in the process. He's replaced in 1892 by Sergey Vit. He worked in the developing of the railways. He became, first of all, Minister for Communication, then Minister of Finance, 1892 to 1903. He later became Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister of Russia. And he saw economic modernisation as essential and as a key way of stopping revolutionary activity. Now, that last part of what he's trying to do seems unlikely, considering his policies were protective tariffs, which are going to make goods more expensive, heavy taxation, which is going to make people poorer, and the forced export, which means there's going to be less available in domestic markets. So his policies might well help modernisation, but they're not really going to make people's lives better. And this is one of the real problems with economic policy at this point in time. He encouraged massive foreign investment. He brought in managers and engineers from Western Europe to bring about developments in railways, including the Trans-Siberian Railway, which was the kind of the real centerpiece of this, and also into development of the oil industry, metalworking industries and banking. And there was some success. The number of factory workers doubled 1887 to 1908. Coal production was 5 times higher in 1900 than it had been in 1800. Oil production was 2 times higher in 1900 than it had been in 1890. And the growth rate is even higher than it was in the period we looked at earlier. The annual growth rate was running at 8% in the years 1894 to 1904. And Russia had risen to become the 4th biggest industrial economy in the world. So on the grand scale, things were working. But again, one of the problems with all of this is, yes, there is some modernisation and some industrialisation, but the Russian people are not seeing the benefit of economic progress. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that's been of use to you. Please, if it has been, like the video, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel. Help support me in my aim of covering this entire specification, and also it will give you notifications, etc., of when I put up new videos. If you're interested in politics or other bits of history, there's plenty more on my channel as well. Thank you very much for watching.